Here's what's coming up on today's show.
Today, Mark and I are going to talk about 5 unfortunately common beneficiary mistakes. Are you making one of these beneficiary mistakes? If so, it could cost you and your loved ones dearly. We want to help you avoid making simple mistakes that can completely spoil an otherwise well-done retirement plan.
It's easy to get lost on the way to retirement. Things like taxes, improper planning, and excessive market risk can all lead you astray from your goal of a successful and happy retirement. That's where Liz Whittaberry comes in. She's a holistic financial advisor and the founder of Best Path Advisors, and she can help guide you to a better financial path. This is Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry.
Welcome into this week's edition of Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry and myself. We're here to talk about 5 beneficiary mistakes. We're going to get into this conversation this week here on the show with Liz. And of course, if you've got questions or concerns, as always, check in with a qualified professional like Liz, who is the founder and financial advisor at Best Path Advisors. Find her online at bestpathadvisors.com. That is bestpathadvisors.com. Liz, how you doing?
I am good. How are you?
Doing pretty good. We're taping this right after Mother's Day, so hopefully you had a lovely Mother's Day, as well as all of our moms that are listening to the podcast.
I did, and I got to talk to my mom, so that's always
nice.
special.
Yeah. Mine's 82, and so we bring her over. She comes over just about every week anyway. So she's like, "What are we doing special this weekend?" And I said, "We're same thing we always do, having you come over and hang out." She's like, "Okay, that'll work." She didn't really want to do a whole lot anyway, so. But
well, she sounds lovely.
Yeah, she's funny. She's a pistol, that's for sure. Hey, let's jump into our topic this week because even thinking about Mother's Day, right? And as our parents are aging or whatever, sometimes we're updating things and changing things, and there's lots of reasons why we might come across a need to make an update here. And these are some simple things often, Liz, that can really cause people a lot of heartache and issues and money and everything in your retirement strategy, whether it's while you're still here or even after you're gone. And many of these things can be done pretty easily and really almost at no cost to make some of these changes. And it just saves a lot of heartache. So let's jump in and talk about a few of these. We'll kick it off with naming minors as beneficiaries. Maybe not something that happens as often for clients that are, retirees or pre-retirees, but there could be some reasons why you have minors on there. What's some issues and things to be concerned about here?
Well, under the law, if you name a minor as a beneficiary, they're not going to be able to receive that benefit until they're at least 18 or 21, depending on the state that you live in. Okay. Here in Texas, it's 18. And like you say, retirees may not have children that are minors, but they could have grandchildren that they want to name. And you can't name them directly as a beneficiary of an account and have them receive that. It will be placed in a uniform gifts to minors account, and there'll have to be a guardian that's monitoring that. And so you want to think through that because there are other approaches to handling that. But I think on top of that, you really want to think through, when do you want them to have the money? Because if you do name them, they are going to get it at 18, whether that was when you would have given it to them or not.
Sure. And do they have kind of the wherewithal to handle it, especially depending on how much money it is? Lots of things to think about there. Yeah, for sure. Well, you know what? Actually, I'm going to move our list around in order a little bit, Liz, because I think number 3 actually works better as number 2. So I'm going to switch this real quick and roll us into this because maybe what you should consider if a minor is on the your ID on your radar to do is having an alternate or a successor beneficiary. Not doing this can be problematic for a number of reasons, not just minors, but I thought this was a good segue into this alternate or successor beneficiary. Because maybe, for example, Liz, many people might have their spouse on there. Like, it's just me and my wife and our daughter, right? And the odds of my wife and I passing at the same time are slim, but what if we were in an accident, right? And and I had her named, but we didn't have an alternate. So that's important too.
It is. It is very important to ensure that there is a beneficiary at the end of that trail, whatever that trail may be, so that there is somebody that's named. Because if you don't have a living beneficiary that can inherit, then it's going to have to go through some sort of probate process, and the court's going to have to make a decision, and they'll have to look to law to say, well, what does the law say? Who should be the next person that would receive this under the law, and that may or may not be, how you want it to flow, or it'll flow according to your will. If you do have a will, some people do, some people don't. But it'll have to go to court.
Yeah, for sure.
It'll have to go to court. And it, like you say, it's very easy to add successor beneficiaries to a 401k or an IRA. Or
doesn't cost you anything,
account.
Right?
Yeah, it's just another spot on the form. But there are assets and accounts that don't make it easy for you to name that successor beneficiary.
Oh, okay.
And a couple of things I'm thinking of are I-bonds, for one. You can only name one beneficiary on an I-bond or a joint beneficiary, but you can't name multiple layers of beneficiaries on an I-bond.
Good to know.
And that has come up because I-bonds are now very, very popular. Another would be real estate. Real estate doesn't have
really,
the ability to add layers of beneficiaries on directly on, because it's a titled property. So
yeah,
it's
I guess that makes sense, but I guess you never really think of it that way, though, do you? Until you said that. I mean, like, now that you said it, I think about it. I go, okay, yeah, I think I haven't seen that before, but in your mind, you kind of go, oh, well, surely we could name an alternate person. But that's a great point.
Yeah. Here in Texas, we have now just recently enacted a sort of a beneficiary deed. Up until very recently, we didn't even have that as one of the common ways of handling a deed. And so you can name, it's you and your wife, and then it goes to this successor person, but you can't continue to name alternates and alternates and alternates.
Right.
So in those situations, in my opinion, to have a revocable living trust really is a better way to approach it, because you can name the trust as the beneficiary of an account, or you can name the trust on, a trust can own property, instead of you. It is still your property, but it's your revocable trust that's owning this property. And then within the trust, you can have all the layers of beneficiaries that you want and spell out when would people receive it, under what terms would they receive it. So if they're younger, it's going to wait until whatever that age might be, and could be, spread out over some period of time, so they don't get everything all at once. So to me, that makes for a better way of approaching that. With
you mentioning trust, I think sometimes people hear that and they think, well, yeah, but I'm not rich enough for that, right? And I think trust has that weird misnomer to it that it's only for the really wealthy. But I mean, many people have trust, and you don't have to be a Rockefeller to have one.
Correct. The revocable living trust is really just an alternative to a will. It's not. There are certainly hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of trusts, and some of them are very complex and have reasons for enacting them to help wealthier people minimize taxes, avoid taxes, do some complicated estate planning. But a revocable living trust is an alternative to going through probate. It's a way to pass your assets to the next generation, to whoever your heirs are, and it provides some benefits that you don't have under the will. They both end up getting you in the same place.
Yeah.
But the revocable living trust has more privacy, and you can go back and put those layers of the beneficiaries in and make amendments and change that over time. So there's a lot of flexibility that I see people utilize.
Yeah, that's a great point for sure. And it's actually a good transition point, Liz, to talk about the will, because that's on my list as well. Number 3 is not coordinating your beneficiary designations, your BDs for short, if you will, with your will. And this is another misnomer, too. People think, well, hey, I put it in my will. It's groovy, right? And no, it's like the BD will trump whatever. It doesn't matter what you wrote in your will. If your beneficiary designation, say that 3 times fast, if that is listed as, let's say, an ex-spouse, that's who's going to get it. I mean, every financial advisor I know probably has a story of an ex-spouse being left on some sort of account, and it never got updated, and it comes back to be a problem later on.
That is very true, and I've heard a lot of those stories as well. And in our own family, my husband's uncle left my husband as the executor of his will.
Mm-hmm.
We found out when he passed away that was the case, which is often the situation. Sometimes people don't tell the person they've named that, hey, you're the executor. Because I'm in the industry, we would have asked some questions while he was still living to make sure everything was kind of put together. But we didn't have that opportunity, and he had left the will quite logical. It was fairly up to date. It included everybody. He didn't have any kids, so he's going to his nephews and their kids.
Right.
The beneficiary designations were completely different, didn't match at all, and were so different that my husband's brother felt bad about it. And I know that he ended up sending our two boys, the youngest of the line, a little bit of money, just kind of as a, hey, I don't want you to be left out.
Oh, that's nice.
It was very nice, and not at all, nothing that he had to do, and nothing that certainly that we expected.
But that's a great point to illustrate how it can be, altered from what you really intended if you're not careful. Yeah.
It was not what he intended. And then what happens is when people are trying to do like what my husband's brother did, if it's a large sum of money, then it can begin to eat into people's gifting limits. And, there's other issues that have to be considered in those kind of situations. And I'm actually helping a family right now that has a little bit of that. In one of the accounts wasn't set up at an old pension the way that the rest of the plan was. And so, we're just working through making things equitable for everybody to match the plan. But that becomes quite complicated. And it's much easier to go back and make sure that everything has been updated. And like I said before, if you have a revocable living trust, then you can have that be the beneficiary of most accounts, and then just update the trust.
And
it updates everything.
And think about the naming process here, folks. I mean, it's really, again, it's easy to do. Sure, you got to, pick the people or whatever that case that, might be in your family, but it's something very, very simple to do. And it causes so much trouble if you have the wrong names on there. And somebody taught me a couple of years ago, the 4 Ds. Anytime you have one of the 4 Ds happen, go through and check your beneficiary designation. So if you have a divorce, a death in the family, a disability, or at least once a decade. And that's kind of how I remembered it. And I thought, well, that's a good way of doing it. And obviously, again, it doesn't take much to change this, to update this stuff when you have a major life event. So make sure you're doing that.
Exactly. Just a little bit of paperwork.
Yep. Not the most fun thing, but easy to do. So let's move on to our 4th point here. And you were talking about a trust. So what is the pros, cons, things to think about if you're naming an estate as the beneficiary?
Yes, there's quite a few issues to be aware of. If you name your estate as your beneficiary, then your assets are going to go through probate, and that's going to give courts some say in how the assets are distributed.
Makes it public, right?
It does make it public. Of course, the court can use the assets to repay debts. Now, most of my clients don't have debts or very minimal, pay off their credit cards every month. But it is something to be aware of, and especially if you're talking to your children or grandchildren about how they're putting their plan together.
Sure.
Probate is public. It's going to take longer to navigate that process. But the other issue with naming your estate as a beneficiary is that the estate is not a person and doesn't have the same rights as a person. So if you're naming your estate as a beneficiary on your 401k, that's an easy answer to put, estate. Or if you're setting up your IRA, or you have some kind of an insurance product, a life insurance policy, or an annuity, and you just name the estate on that. Well, the estate is not going to have the same ability to choose to defer taxes. If a spouse is the beneficiary of an IRA or a 401k, they can assume it as their own. They can continue that tax deferral for life. If your children or other individuals are heirs, then they get to defer taxes on those IRAs or 401ks for a 10-year period under the current law, which gives them some flexibility to do some tax planning. the estate has 5 years. And that's, that can make it much more costly and much more restrictive in, what can we do on a tax basis here to minimize taxes and maximize the value that we're getting to our heirs.
Okay.
So
a lot of little loopholes, it sounds like, with naming the estate. So again, it's really important to have a complete professional team helping you with some of, and now some of this stuff, Liz, it's pretty easy. Again, right? Like if you're just updating your 401, maybe some insurance policies, but if you're getting into something more complex, you certainly want to be working with a financial professional as well as probably an estate attorney.
Right. Absolutely. If you have a complex situation, you want an estate planning attorney involved.
Yeah, for sure.
And I work with a number of them to make sure that clients are getting really good advice on that area.
Yeah. Well, our fifth one is a really super easy one. Look, people are human. They make mistakes, all sorts of things. We have so much automated stuff nowadays. So a very simple thing to not overlook is just checking the application for errors, right? Making sure the name is spelled correctly, the right social security numbers are entered. That's important. It's not unfixable, if it goes through after something happens, but it's certainly just more trouble than it's worth, and it's an easy fix.
Correct. And I would say it's important to use that full legal name that's on that individual's driver's license. It's something that matches their legal documents.
Right.
We have so many people that have a nickname that they go by, and it's very easy to just put that.
Right.
But it needs to be the full legal name. The other thing I'd say is, as you're going through this process, we talked about verifying those beneficiaries. You said at least every decade. That would be a good minimum amount of time. Mm-hmm. You might even want to do it every 5 years or more often. But double check that the institutions still have that information on file. I've had more than one situation where a bank was bought by another bank and the beneficiary designation didn't carry over, or a bank had some kind of restructuring of their systems internally and some of the beneficiary information got lost, or it was just a very, very, very old account and the paperwork, who the beneficiary was hard to find. They're going back to try and find very old files and locate that. So just making sure that is on hand. Again, it is fixable, but it can be a lot of work when the institution doesn't have it handy. It's much better to verify it and keep copies.
Yep.
I tell people now, always get a copy. You'll go into a bank and sign a beneficiary form and they don't print you a copy of it. So I say, take a snapshot with your phone and keep a copy of what you've signed and put it in your records so that you have that on hand with every single institution, and make sure that that's with your legal documents so that your executor, your successor trustee, they have that right in front of them. They know who the beneficiary should be. And that will just make it so much easier than, trying to track down the information.
Especially
the institution has lost it. Yeah.
Right. Especially maybe years later or whatever. So again, they're all pretty easy for the most part. So these are 5 beneficiary mistakes that could spoil your retirement. And most of these are pretty darn easy to fix. And of course, as always, if you need some help, talk with your financial professional. If you're working with someone and they haven't brought up to any of this stuff to you and said, hey, we need to update this. It's been a while, whatever the case is, let them know. Ask them. And of course, if you need some help or a second opinion, that's what Liz is here for, because she's got her clients all set for this. But if you're new to the podcast and you have some questions, get on her calendar, have a conversation, reach out to her at bestpathadvisors.com. That's bestpathadvisors.com. A lot of good tools, tips, and resources, and you can schedule some time to chat with Liz as well. Anything else we might have missed, Liz, before we go?
Well, I would just add that I think one of our biggest issues is just stopping to take the time to do this. We always think we have plenty of time, and
True.
I fall into that trap too. And sometimes we don't have as much time as we think, and it's always, always better to have everything in order, not need to do anything, not need to use it, than to leave a mess. So set aside the time and make sure that you look at your beneficiary designations this year and make sure everything's in order.
Yep, and that'll help you retire on your best path, and that's the podcast. So make sure to subscribe to us, on Apple, Google, Spotify, whatever platform you like to use. Just type in Retire on Your Best Path into the search box or stop by Liz's website, bestpathadvisors.com.
The preceding program is sponsored by Best Path Advisors, which is solely responsible for its content. Securities offered through J.W. Cole Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through J.W. Cole Advisors. Best Path Advisors, J.W. Cole Financial, and J.W. Cole Advisors are unaffiliated entities. The opinions expressed by Liz Whitberry should not be construed as specific tax, legal, or investment advice, nor as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Neither J.W. Cole Financial nor its representatives provide legal, tax, or accounting advice. Persons who provide such advice do so in a capacity other than as a registered representative of J.W. Cole. Investing is subject to risks, including the loss of principal. Due to volatility within the markets mentioned, opinions are subject to change without notice. Information is based on sources believed to be reliable, however, their accuracy or completeness cannot be guaranteed.